President, please be seated. The chamber is now back in session, and I give the floor to Judge Mark Laverne to continue putting his questions to the witness.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Before I put new questions to the witness, I first wanted to provide the ERN references of Mr. Chandler's book that I quoted this morning. So this is document E3/1693. English ERN is 00192681. French 00357264. Khmer 00191830. Witness, I wish to put the following question to you. At S21, was there a department in charge of supplies? That is to say, a department in charge of relations with other administrations in order to meet the operational needs of the prison. Let me give you some examples. In order to have S21 operate, iron was necessary to build shackles, or they had to receive iron shackles directly. Bricks were necessary to build walls, and vehicles were necessary, and ammunition, clothes. So was there a department at S21 that was in charge of all of this?
Je sais que ma question est très longue, mais est-ce que vous avez compris?
I know that my question is rather long, but did you understand it?
I understand your question about the supplies to S21. There was a logistic department or economic department, but in regards to caps or bricks, it was Ho who was in charge of the guards unit that were responsible for resolving this matter.
Do you know who this person would report to or address himself to manufacture shackles? Where did the shackles come from? Where were they manufactured? It appears that in certain photographs, the shackles resembled metal studs that can be placed in concrete to reinforce the concrete. So do you have an idea where the shackles came from?
I did not know clearly about this matter because it was Ho's responsibility. I knew only that these things you mentioned were brought in by Ho.
You yourself, you needed paper. Maybe you needed typewriters. So whom would you talk to obtain those supplies?
For paperwork, I contacted Maine, who was in charge of the S-21's interrogation unit.
Alors,
Well, you said that there was a logistics unit, which was part of which unit? Depended on which unit. Was it part of the interrogators unit, of the guard unit? Where was this unit placed in the organization, and who was heading this logistics department?
The logistic unit that supply fish meat. There was only one person in charge of that, and it was located within the interrogation unit, and there was only one person in charge of that.
et vous vous souvenez du...
And do you remember that person's name?
I remember his name. The name is Thorn.
Est-ce que vous pourriez...
Can you please repeat? Because apparently there was a problem in our link with the interpretation booth, so we didn't hear the name. Could you please repeat it?
The name is Thorn, who was in charge of economics at S-21. He was in S-21B, who was in charge of obtaining meat and vegetables.
Alors, je suis désolé de vous...
Well, I'm sorry to ask you that question for the third time, but I still did not hear the name of this person. Please just tell me the name.
The name is Thorn.
Voilà.
Fine. Now I finally heard the name. It was Ton. I'm not sure if the other French speakers heard it, but apparently there's a connection problem, or in any case, there is static coming from the French booth, so I think that is the issue.
Personnellement, je n'ai pas de friture.
I don't have any static, personally speaking, but it's true that I did not hear the name. Well, now we're going to move on to another topic, witness. Yesterday, the prosecutor put to you questions about Tak Mau prison. And I'd like to provide a document to you. This is document E3/9841. And I would like to specify that this document has just been translated. And I believe the parties were notified of this. Maybe not through Zylab. So, yes, the translation I have of this document states the following on the cover page. So I will read it out in English.
Coming list, all comrades are requested to not to tear or touch this book, and one shall not tear off any pages of the book, as these are merely the list of enemies.
On the following pages, you can see that bills from a company by the name of Sung Home are included, and there are columns, and we see people's names with the name of their spouses, and at the bottom of the first, or the second page rather, we see the following that is written:
Black Mao to be smashed on 14 November 1976. Monsieur le témoin,
Witness, did you ever see this document?
I never encountered this document before.
est-ce que vous reconnaissez
Do you recognize the handwriting? Is this handwriting familiar to you? Can you tell us who possibly wrote all of these notes?
I cannot say it clearly. Because I had no contact with the Takmau prison, so I could not tell you who wrote it.
alors sur
Well, on this list, there are different indications, in particular indications of people who returned from abroad, who a priori were arrested. There's someone who returned from France, and there is a judge who was returning from France. And we can also see a little bit further down lists stating that a priori speaking, cells or special places where people were placed. For example, at one point they speak about a house.
est-ce qu'il y avait
Go. So at S21, were such designations used, such as house, go, or go?
At that time, there were such designation on buildings. But when I examine this document, it does not match with S21B.
est-ce que vous pouvez être
Can you be a bit more explicit and tell us how this document is not related to S21B?
Because everything looked different in terms of building locations, and even the list style or formats are different.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. You said to us, witness, that when you were at S21, you were part of the guard unit. So the unit in which you were working, was it called the documentation unit?
ផ្នែកដែលខ្ញុំធ្វើការហ្នឹងគឺមិន
I was within the guards unit.
Je comprends.
Fine, I understand, of course, that your department was part of the guard unit, but you yourself, personally speaking, were you in charge of a specific department or a section called the documentation department, or was there elsewhere at S21 a group or department called the documentation group or department?
No ក្នុងផ្នែកកងការពារនេះគឺ
Within the guards units, there were no department of documentation. My group is called the 18 group, and it was within the guards unit.
ហើយខ្ញុំសូមបញ្ជាក់បន្ថែមបន្តិចទៀតថានៅក្រមមន្ទីរហ្នឹងគឺវាមានក្នុងគេឲ្យឈ្មោះក្រមមន្ទីរតែក្រមទី18ចុងក្រោយគេ
And let me add some more details. In the 18th group, it also included electrical mechanics. And Thorn was also within this department.
In the group, in the interrogator unit, as far as you know, was there a group called the documentation group? And if yes, who was in charge of this documentation group?
In the interrogation unit, I do not know clearly about who was the supervisor of the documentation group. But for the interrogation unit, it was called the first office group, and Duch was the chairman. As I told you, I cannot recall it well about who was the chairman of the documentation group.
Fine, but you have just confirmed that there was a group called the documentation group within the interrogator unit. Is that the case?
Ici, oui.
And if that is the case, can you tell us how many people were working in this documentation group? And if you know, can you tell us if they had other duties than simply documentation? For example, in this group, were there people who themselves would carry out interrogations?
Let me clarify again. Concerning the work of the interrogation unit, I do not know clearly because I worked within the guards unit.
Fine. Witness, you said that you took part in a certain number of training sessions. Can you tell us if during these sessions, when prisoners were being discussed, were they referred to as prisoners or were they referred to as enemies?
Comment désigner
How were the detainees designated during the training sessions?
I did not pay much attention to these words because everyone who was brought in was called prisoners. I did not pay much attention to the labels that you just mentioned, whether they were called prisoners or enemy.
Fine. Witness, I'm going to ask that a document be provided to you. This is document E3/8386. This is a document, or rather, a circular entitled The Surveillance Regulation of the Enemies, free translation. This document is at Khmer ERN 0002637 to 2640, and in English 00521631 to 34. Does this document remind you of anything?
I did not know about this document. It was probably circular issue to the guards. I myself have never seen it.
On reviendra.
Later on, we'll get back to this document. Now, I would like to return to very practical aspects. I'd like to discuss the arrival of the prisoners at S21. When the prisoners arrived, were you able to sign a document which was kind of a release that you would, or a receipt rather, covering the prisoners who had just arrived? Do you remember using this kind of document, this kind of receipt regarding the prisoners who had just arrived?
The special unit was in charge of receiving the prisoners. For me, I received the prisoner from the special unit who brought the prisoner into the prison.
Well, I'm going to ask that a document be provided to you. This is a document that is an excerpt from document E3/8783. Khmer ERN is 00008084. The English ERN is 00182982. So I wish to specify that we can no longer read the name of the prisoners or the names in the columns in this document, because this document is a table. We simply see the outline and the titles of each column. So we see the original name, an alias, age, sex, professional occupation, and the unit or the office where these people came from. And below this table we see an annotation stating the date of receipt, the number of people who were received,
Tan, Ton,
and we also see,
apparemment,
and apparently,
Ti. Alors,
we see received by T. So, did you use this kind of form?
I never met such a form when I was working at S21. It was the special unit who were based outside gave the prisoners to us. I rarely met such the form. As I said earlier, it was the special unit which was based outside who were in charge of bringing in the prisoners.
Monsieur le témoin.
Question. Witness, there are very precise indications on the document. I note that the persons were handed over by a person called Tan. Do you know that person, Tan? And below that it's indicated received by T, and there is a signature on the document. Do you recognize that signature as yours?
Et apparemment également.
And apparently, also above Office 21, S21, it is indicated signed by all.
Regarding this person, I never did it for him, and the signature is not that clear to me. And if it was Ton's, Ton was also a part of the special unit.
En l'occurrence,
and in particular, the document doesn't specify that you are the one who drew up the list. That list was given to you when the prisoners arrived. Do you understand that?
Of course, I understand that. Whenever the special unit brought the prisoners in, I received those prisoners and then I would make their biographies. And usually it was the exchange between the special force, the special unit and myself.
À l'avance.
Question. Witness, were you informed in advance of the arrival of prisoners at S21? Or it was always in the last minute that you were informed that the prisoners had arrived and you had to register them?
I was not told in advance that the prisoners would arrive. When they arrived, they would be brought in, and I was never told that they would arrive. So when the prisoners were brought to me, I would register their names.
Est-ce que lorsque les prisonniers arrivent,
When the prisoners arrived, they were handed over to you. Were you also given documents concerning those prisoners, apart from the list we are talking about? What I mean is, did they give you biographies drawn up by the units from which they came, notes and messages, for instance? Were those prisoners sometimes accompanied by documents?
For prisoners who arrived, I never received any documents accompanied with them. Usually, if there were any documents, it will be delivered to the superior, and only the prisoners were walked in by special units to me for registration.
alors,
Very well. Let me take an example, and I will request that document E3/10/521 be given to you.
le RN
The ERN in Khmer is 011 80 400 to 011 80 413. And the ERN in English is 01 19 14 83 to 95. These are biographies of Vietnamese fishermen. Did you ever see these kinds of documents? And do you know whether these documents are from S21 or from elsewhere?
I do not know about this document. If this document existed, Dutch would have in his possession. Usually when people were brought in, and if there was any document accompanied them, then Dutch would be in possession of those documents.
Est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire,
Question. Witness. When prisoners arrived at S21, were they searched? Please tell me if I'm wrong. What I understand is that when prisoners arrived, they were blindfolded and handcuffed. Is that correct?
et est-ce qu'ils étaient fouillés?
And were they searched?
Prisoners who were brought into S21 were brought in from various locations. So, to my understanding, they actually were searched at the locations where they were about to be taken to S21. And upon their arrival, they were blindfolded or cuffed, and they had nothing else with them.
Est-ce qu'ils
Question. Did they have to take off their clothes?
Upon their arrival at S21, they were stripped of their clothes by a special unit before they were brought to my office. Sometimes they were half naked, or they wore trousers or a shirt.
Pour quelles raisons enlevait-on les vêtements?
Question. Why were the clothes of prisoners taken off?
That what was done by a special unit, and I did not know the reason behind that. My understanding is probably they conducted a search on those prisoners.
Quand vous avez
Question. When you testified on the 28th of July 2009 before 10 hours 57, document E3/74105, this is what you stated. Free translation. The detainees who arrived at my unit had to take off their clothes and keep only their breeches on, and they were not authorized to take away anything at all. Prisoners who were arrested from S21 were not authorized to bring with them anything other than their own clothes. Do you confirm that statement?
I would like to clarify the following. When prisoners arrived at the special unit, the prisoners' clothes would be stripped, and of course they were still being blindfolded and cuffed. And when they arrived at my locations, there was nothing attached to these prisoners.
Alors,
Question. A while ago, we talked of the rules, document E3/8386. Let me point out that your statements are at variance with what is found in those rules, particularly point number 12 of the first paragraph, which reads as follows, free translation. As regards the clothes of the enemies, they have to wear all of them. They are not allowed to take off their clothes. If they take off their clothes without any authorization, they would be imperatively confiscated so that they won't have anything to put on.
Que vous maintenez vos déclarations?
Do you stand by your statement? You are saying that the practice was that the detainee wore only breeches or shorts.
On the issue of clothes, I didn't know for sure. It is possible that the interrogation unit people might allow them to wear those clothes again. I cannot recall that clearly since it happened many years ago.
Oui, sauf que
Question. Yes. Except that when they appeared before you, you could see whether they were dressed or not. When they appeared before you, did you observe that they were wearing anything or were they naked?
It varied. Some of them had the clothes on, some of them wore shorts and shirtless. However, most of them would have shorts and shirts on. And I did not pay attention to that. Whether they had their clothes on or not depended on the special unit. If they had shirt and shorts, they would have shirt and shorts on when they appear before me.
est-ce qu'il vous a...
Question. Witness. Did you sometimes see civilian Vietnamese detainees arrive in civilian attire? And then did you also see Vietnamese in military attire? Did you ever see civilians asked to wear military attire?
To my knowledge, I never saw Vietnamese prisoners in military uniform. They wore civilian clothes. But I cannot say anything else besides what I remember.
Je vais lire le...
Question. I will read out to you point number 10 of the regulations, and it is point number 10 of paragraph 1. While on guard, cadres and combatants must make checks at all times in absolute accordance with the schedule. That is 4 times, at 6 a.m. once, at 11 a.m. once, at 6 p.m. once, and at 11 p.m. one last time. Free translation. Did you witness such searches? Witness.
នេះចំពោះ
Personally, I did not pay attention to the regulations for those guards. Only Hui, who would be well versed about these regulations or about the searches.
Est-ce que vous...
Question. Did you observe whether or not, upon their arrival, some prisoners had blisters and signs that they had been beaten up. And did you also see cases of prisoners who died during their transportation to S21?
ចំពោះ
For prisoners who were transported and died upon arrival, I never saw such a case at my place. As for the bruises, I did not pay attention to that. My focus was to write down their names when they were presented before me.
Monsieur T.
Question. Witness, when you asked them to unveil their identities, for instance, when you asked them what their names were, did you look at them? And did you observe that some of them had bruises on them?
I did not pay attention to any bruises or marks on prisoners because they kept coming in, so I had to take down their name and brief biography one per one, and after that they would be sent off to be photographed.
Donc, par exemple,
Question. So, for instance, it never happened that a prisoner was sent directly to you by the medical service because they arrived in a pitiful condition.
គឺអត់ដែល
No, that never happened. There was no case where a prisoner arrived and required a medical service.
bien, donc,
Question. Very well. So, your work, your initial work, consisted in filling out biographical sheets, filling out blank spaces on those sheets which were individual. What were the objectives of those individual forms, and how many copies could you produce? A single copy or several copies?
There was a single copy of the registration form. After I fill in the registration form, the form will be later on attached with a photograph, and who was the one who made that instruction to me. And when I was idle, then I would have to duplicate another form from that.
donc vous faisiez une
Question. So you did duplicates. Who were you supposed to send those duplicates to?
ខ្ញុំចាំមិន
I cannot recall it clearly, since I personally did not make many duplicates of the original copies, since I was so busy making the original copies continuously. And I rarely made a duplicate of those original copies.
quand vous faisiez
Question. When you did the copies, was it because you were requested to make those copies? And if yes, who were you supposed to hand those copies to?
As I have just stated, I should only do the duplicate of those original copies when I had free time, but I was so occupied with the original copies and I did not have time to duplicate those original copies.
À qui
Question. Who did you give those copies to? Did you keep them or you gave them to someone else?
The second copy was not taken elsewhere. It was kept at the same location. But as I said, there were not many second copies made since I was busy. I was busy producing the first copies as well as to make the original biography of those prisoners.
sur
Question. On each form, apparently, there was the indication of the place where the detainee was imprisoned. For instance, a house, a big cell, or a small cell. Who decided whether the detainee was going to be held in a big or small cell? Were you the one who took that decision? Were any orders issued? And how were those orders issued?
Nobody gave explicit instruction as to which cell to house a prisoner. It depended upon the guards who took them to the cells. Wherever the cells were available, then prisoners would be placed in those cells by the guards.
pour remplir
Question. To fill out the biographical forms, you had to indicate where the prisoner was going to be detained. Who decided where the prisoner was going to be kept? Or was it the guards who decided that it was at such and such a place, such and such a cell, or such and such a house?
For prisoners who were brought in, they would be registered, their photographs were taken, and the guards would take them by themselves through the building or cells that were vacant.
donc
Question. So it was the guards who gave you the information you needed to fill out the biographical forms indicating where the prisoners were supposed to be held.
After I registered their names, the guards would take them to the prisoners to the building and cells, and later on I would go through those cells to take down the particular cells that the prisoners were held.
est-ce que vous pouvez nous
Question. Can you tell me how those archives and biographies were kept? Was there an archiving system which was maintained in the order of arrival, in alphabetical order, according to buildings? Can you tell us whether there was any particular order in which they were supposed to be kept or not?
The biographies were stored in a big book. And I cannot recall it clearly whether they were filed according to their units or they were filed according to the date of entry.
Et ces grands
Question. And these big registers, were they in this form of books or simple boxes in which sheets of paper were kept?
The main register existed in a form of boxes or dossiers where I could attach those biographies in.
Est-ce que
Question. Over and above the simple biographical forms, did each individual have an individual file in which you could put, for instance, confessions given by the detainees at S21, or perhaps other photographs?
est-ce qu'il y avait un dossier individuel?
Was there an individual file which was more than a simple biographical form?
កន្លែង
At my office, there was no dossier for individual prisoner. What it was is that there was only a single sheet of biographic information together with their photograph attached.
Est-ce que vous
Question. Do you recall whether the photographs of prisoners were taken once they were executed, or those photographs were added after the biographical form had been filled out, or they were added wherever they were kept?
As for the biography, usually only a photograph of the incoming prisoner was attached to the biography, but not the photo of their executions.
est-ce que vous
Do you know if there were photographs of executed prisoners?
I do not know for sure about this,
ទៅកន្លែងដែល
since I did not go to the photography office.
ធោទេដែលគេដឹង
Only Ho was aware of that.
Monsieur le témoin,
Witness, I'm going to read out part of the testimony you made on 28 July 2009. This is document E37466 at around 11:33 in the morning. You said the following. With regard to the senior cadres, their pictures were taken upon orders coming from above. For example, Chai's picture was taken. Chai Kim Hua's picture, Von Vet's picture was also taken, as well as Li Pan, alias Pan. And you specified then that their bodies were unburied and their pictures were taken 3 days after the bodies had been buried. Does this somehow refresh your memory?
I cannot recall it well.
apparemment, c'est
Apparently, this is what you said here in this very same courtroom.
Est-ce que vous avez des problèmes de...
Do you have any memory issues, Mr. Witness?
I cannot recall it well. President, the floor is given to Counsel Victor Kope.
Yes, sorry to interrupt, but it's my recollection that that was Duik who said that, not the witness.
Alors peut-être...
Well, maybe what Duke had said was quoted when this witness was being heard, but I will check this. You said this morning that with regard to prisoners who were exiting, you had to draw up a list of the prisoners who had to be taken out of the groups. So was this word taken out used, or was it rather the word smash? Did take out and smash mean the same thing?
For the word removal and smashed, they have the same meaning.
Donc,
so you said that you would receive a list with annotations from Doik. So I'd like to show you another list. This is document E3/10166A. Can this document be provided to the witness, please? Yes. So I'd like to specify that this is a document that has just been translated. And I believe that the parties were notified very recently, or they will be receiving an email. The list is called List of People to be Moved.
et sauf erreur de ma...
And unless I'm mistaken, there is an annotation that was not translated in the English version right next to the title. So witness, can you read out what is written in the annotation?
The written annotation is smash.
Est-ce que vous avez déjà...
Did you ever see lists that resembled this one?
I find it hard to anticipate about this list.
Alors, je précise.
Well, I'd like to specify for the public that this is a list of 40 prisoners, and most of these prisoners are women, well, practically all of them, who either were pregnant or who had just delivered. And I would like to specify that this list contains the names of the female prisoners, their age, their position, and the ministry or the unit they came from, and the date they entered as 21, the name of their spouses, the occupation of their spouses, the unit their spouses were working in, and the number of children. And we see, for example, as well, annotations like
4 months pregnancy. Alors, est-ce que vous...
So, do you remember having seen this kind of list, witness? Knowing that if we look at each line, we can see not only the name of the female prisoner, but also the number of children. On the first line, we know that this female prisoner had 4 children, or 3. Did you ever see this list or this kind of list, witness?
I find it hard to comment on this list because I have never produced these types of list. I never produced the list which details such things as just delivering babies or pregnancy. President, it is now convenient time for break. The chamber will take a short break from now until 3 o'clock. Court officer, please assist the witness at the waiting room reserved for the witness during the break time and invite him back together with his duty counsel into the courtroom at 3 o'clock. The court is now in recess.